Your water record is now blocking more than water permit. There is a particular kind of stall happening inside capital projects right now. An expansion that clears financial review, a site modification that makes operational sense, a permit application that should, by every reasonable measure, move through the process without much friction. And then it doesn't. The timeline slips, questions arrive from the regulator, and somewhere in the paperwork trail is a water compliance issue that no one thought to flag because the current project had nothing to do with water. This is not an unusual scenario anymore. It is becoming a pattern, and the operations leaders who understand how it works are the ones who don't get surprised by it. How a water violation travels. Water compliance history follows a facility in ways that most operations teams don't fully track. When a company applies for a new permit, a permit modification, or an expansion of operations at an existing site, regulators reviewing that application routinely check the facility's compliance record. That record includes water discharge history under the Clean Water Act's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, commonly known as NPDES. If that record shows unresolved violations, repeat inspection findings, or a pattern of stormwater exceedances, the application does not necessarily get denied. But it does get scrutiny it would not otherwise receive. Conditions get added, reviews get extended. In some jurisdictions, compliance history is now being used more formally as a threshold criterion before new permits are considered. Illinois has moved legislation requiring the state EPA to screen permit applicants' compliance history before issuing new air permits. The principle being established is simple. A facility that has not managed its existing environmental obligations is a different risk than one that has. Regulators in several states are applying that logic across program areas, meaning a water violation history can surface in a permit conversation that was originally about something else entirely. That is the mechanism most operations teams are not tracking. The state divergence that compounds the risk. Federal and state permitting programs don't always talk to each other cleanly, but state regulators talk to state records. And state water enforcement is running on its own calendar. California's position makes the point most clearly. Under Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, states have the authority to certify, condition, or deny federal permits for activities that affect waters within their boundaries. When the Army Corps of Engineers issued its 2026 nationwide permits, California's State Water Board conditionally certified 19 of the 54 permits submitted for review and denied 38 outright. That is not a marginal outcome. For projects in California that depend on one of those denied permits, the federal pathway is effectively closed until an individual permit application can be assembled and reviewed, a process that can add months or longer to a project timeline. States like New York and New Jersey run their own discharge permit programs with their own compliance tracking. A facility with water quality findings in one state that begins a permit process in another does not carry a clean slate. And for multi-site companies managing permit applications across several jurisdictions simultaneously, the compliance picture at any one facility can create friction in conversations that should be unrelated. The data gap most facilities are carrying. Part of what makes this operationally difficult is that most facilities do not have a clear current picture of their own compliance profile, as it would appear to an external reviewer. Internal compliance tracking tends to focus on what was addressed, the corrective action taken, the exceedance that was reported, the inspection that was resolved. What regulators and other external parties see is the record as it was filed, which includes the violations before they were corrected, and patterns across inspection cycles that internal tracking may not surface. According to Montrose Environmental Group, only about 38% of industrial facilities are currently meeting the quarterly stormwater sampling requirements under the multi-sector general permit, according to industry compliance data. That is a significant share of the regulated population with potential compliance gaps that they may not have fully characterized in terms of how those gaps would look to a regulator reviewing a future permit application. EPA's Enforcement and Compliance History online database, publicly accessible at echo.epa.gov, shows what that record looks like from the outside. Running a facility through it before a permit application is submitted takes a matter of hours. Many operations teams have not done it and would benefit from the exercise. Where this shows up in capital planning. The place this creates the most friction is not in routine permit renewals, where facilities generally have time to prepare and relationships with the relevant regulators. It shows up in project-driven timelines, where a capital expenditure has been approved, a contractor has been engaged, and a permit is sitting in a queue that is moving slower than the project schedule assumed. Water compliance history has also begun to appear in site selection conversations in ways it didn't a few years back. When companies are evaluating locations for new facilities or expansions, environmental due diligence has always included checking for site contamination and existing liabilities. It is now also beginning to include an assessment of the compliance history at comparable facilities in the same operating portfolio, as a signal of whether the company's operational practices are likely to generate regulatory friction at the new site. That is a different kind of due diligence question than most facilities teams have been asked to answer. The operational decision for facilities leaders. The practical implication for anyone managing facilities and capital projects this quarter is straightforward. Even if acting on it requires some coordination, know your record before your next permit application. Pull the NPDES compliance history for any facility where a permit application or modification is anticipated in the next 12 to 18 months. Understand what is in it, what pattern it shows, and how a regulator reviewing a new application would read it. If there are open items, the time to address them is before the application, not during the review. Bring facilities and legal together before the project timeline is set. Permit timeline assumptions that don't account for compliance history are the ones that slip. The conversation about what a facility's water record might mean for a specific permit application is one that should happen at project scoping, not after the schedule has been committed. Understand which state-level programs apply. The federal NPDES framework is not the only relevant program. State discharge permits, stormwater permits, and water quality certifications operate on state schedules and reflect state priorities. In states running active enforcement programs, those records are part of the picture a regulator sees when a new application arrives. Water constraints, including the compliance history that precedes them, are going to be a defining operational variable for the rest of this year. If it hasn't already started, that conversation starts now. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.